Hello, hello. Are you or someone you love ready to thrive during menopause and beyond? Join me, Nichole Dandrea-Russert, Food Revolution Network's lead dietitian for this month's Action Hour with renowned gynecologist and lifestyle medicine expert, Dr. Nitu Bajekal. Together, we will explore how nutrition and lifestyle choices can ease menopausal symptoms, reduce reliance on medications, and support vibrant health through every stage of life. In this empowering conversation, Dr. Bajekal will share her insights on navigating hormonal shifts, improving heart health, strengthening bones, and nurturing mental well being. Whether you're currently experiencing menopause, looking ahead, or seeking information for someone you care about, you'll walk away with actionable tools to feel your best and take charge of your health journey. Don't miss this opportunity to embrace this life stage with confidence and vitality. This is a project of Whole Life Club, which is Food Revolution Network's ongoing membership community. Some of the questions that I will be bringing to this interview today come from our Whole Life Club members. Nothing you hear today is medical advice. We are offering coaching in our own best insights. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional regarding your specific healthcare realities and needs. Now, I'd love to introduce Dr. Bajekal. Dr. Nitu Bajekal is a distinguished gynecologist with over 35 years of clinical experience blending traditional women's health with innovative lifestyle medicine in the treatment, reversal, and prevention of several chronic diseases. As one of the first U.S. board certified lifestyle medicine physicians in the UK, she authored the Women's Health module for the pioneering plant based nutrition course at a UK university. Beyond the clinic, Dr. Bajekal founded Women for Women's Health in 2014, a voluntary initiative championing the empowerment of women of all ages to make lifestyle choices to improve their own health and that of their loved ones through education. Dr. Bajekal is also the author of her latest book, Finding Me in Menopause, and co-author of Living PCOS-Free: How to Regain Your Hormonal Health with Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome. Dr. Bajekal, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. What a lovely introduction. I'm blushing.
Oh,
Thank you, Nicole, for inviting me. I'm so excited to be back here, actually.
so excited for our conversation today. Our last one was very inspiring, left so many of us inspired. So I'm excited to see what today brings as well. And we just always love having you. So I'm going to
Thank
just
you.
dive right into the kind of umbrella scope of menopause and perimenopause. Can you define them? What's the difference between the two? And what defines menopause at a woman's stage of life?
So, perimenopause, the word perimenopause is around menopause, is the time when one is transitioning towards stopping their periods completely. So, it tends to be used for the time before one's periods completely stop. And so perimenopause can last anywhere between 2 to 8 years, typically about 4 years before the periods finally stop. And so that is what perimenopause is, or menopause in transition. The term menopause is the time, it's a retrospective diagnosis, and it is defined as the 12 months once periods have completely stopped. So you only look back and actually say, I am now in menopause. People often think that menopause is a finite time, but actually, with life expectancy into our 80s in most of the Western world, we will be in menopause for the rest of our lives until the day we die, and different issues can crop up during this time. So menopause is 12 months retrospective diagnosis, no periods for 12 months. Perimenopause is the time when you transition into menopause and can last for 2 to 8 years. Now, the average age of menopause around the world tends to be about 51 years, but the range is wide, Nicole. It tends to be
Mm.
anywhere between 45 and 55. And if you look at women from certain countries, they tend to have, so Indians or Southeast Asians will often stop their periods in the at 45, 46, 47, while Japanese women may have slightly later menopause. And so it is important to know this variation as well, but 45 to 55 is the range. And before that, 2 to 8 years, so you can start having perimenopausal symptoms Even in your late 30s, if you were destined to stop your periods at
Mm.
45, if it was 8 years before, you can imagine that's 37. So people often think that perimenopause, typically, of course, it occurs around the age of 47, about 4 years before your period stop, which is 51. But not all of us tend to be in that neat category. So it tends to be 45 to 55 is the range, with perimenopause anywhere between 2 to 8 years before. And so I hope I've been able to explain what perimenopause is and what menopause is.
Yes, thank you for that. I feel like that gives us
Yeah, there are also
at least
many
some
different
guidance.
types. Yes, there are also many different types of menopause we have to know a little bit about, and that's important. So there's something called early menopause between the ages of 40 and 45, and typically about 12 women in 100 will actually go through early menopause. And that may be because they've had a hysterectomy or a diagnosis of cancer, or their periods stop earlier genetically as well. And then
Mm.
there's a whole group of women, one of which who was me at the age of 38. So women who stop their periods under the age of 40 is known as premature ovarian insufficiency, or POI, and that is a medical condition. And it's important that you have specialist help for that, as well as go on to HRT unless there's a definite contraindication. So women under the age of 45 should be always on HRT until the normal age of menopause at least. But under 40 is a medical condition, because women can stop their periods even at the age of 14 or 15, or never start a period at all. And that's known as POI. So that's different types of menopause: early
Mm.
menopause and POI. But you also have surgical menopause, medical menopause, which can occur at 45, 46, 40. As I said, because one has had to have a hysterectomy and removal of ovaries because of severe endometriosis, or a diagnosis of cancer, or a diagnosis of even things like chemotherapy or radiotherapy needed for breast cancer, which we know 1 in 7 of us will get a diagnosis of breast cancer, 1 in 8 in the US. So there are different types, and it's important to know that some of these symptoms in menopause might be very acute if you suddenly have to have surgery, or suddenly have to go into medical menopause because of drugs and radiotherapy. So it is important for us as health professionals, but also for the public, to understand that not all menopause occurs at the typical ages of 50, 51, and that a lot of women, two-thirds of the women population, are still working, and 1 in 4 have severe symptoms with menopause. And so it's really important for our employers also to be aware that menopause is a huge umbrella term, like you were saying.
Yeah, thank you for further clarifying that. I think it helps to know what to expect, and also to realize that everybody is so individualized, and to seek
Yes,
medical treatment when you feel like you need to, and to talk to your employer about it, because it's important that others understand. And if you need
absolutely.
time off or anything to attend to any issues, it's really important for women's health.
Yes, because we
Thank
tend
you.
to have, and of course, there are certain groups that may find it even harder, women from minority groups, and those who may have physical or mental disabilities, those who may
Mhm.
be trans. So many other sections also may find it hard to come forward to actually say that they're suffering. And also, there is this assumption that women have to be stoic and have to be strong, and it's a sign of weakness. And even doctors, when they were surveyed by the British Medical Association, they found that the vast majority of female doctors did not know where to turn and did not get the help. So women doctors
Mm.
can't get the help. Can you imagine what's happening in the rest of the workforce
Right.
population?
Right. Yeah. So important. I'm so glad that we're having this conversation today because of
Yeah.
that reason. So thank you. You mentioned symptoms. What are some common symptoms women may experience, and how can we mitigate them through lifestyle changes?
So women have fluctuating hormones throughout their reproductive phase, but as one is entering perimenopause, women may notice that their periods are getting either shorter, or they're hopping and skipping periods. Some women may notice that the periods get not just more frequent, but also get heavier or more painful. And they may be, for the first time, they may be actually having conditions that may be diagnosed, called adenomyosis, or even endometriosis, or fibroids that are raising their head. So a lot of the health conditions can still be a big issue during perimenopause, and you might just be fooled into thinking, oh, my periods must be stopping anytime, so that's why I'll just put up with it. And no, so if you are somebody who's noticing that the periods are getting much more frequent, heavy, you're passing clots, they're lasting longer than 7 days, you're having pain, especially pain that you haven't had before, all those things have to be taken into account. But all the symptoms in menopause can also occur during perimenopause. And we know that the most common symptoms that people talk about are hot flashes, night sweats, and women in perimenopause may notice these symptoms and then they all become fine because the periods go back to being normal. And then again, you have the hopping and skipping of periods. And again, the symptoms arise. And you start thinking, am I going crazy? But actually, those hormones are fluctuating hugely, and there are no blood tests to diagnose perimenopause. So that's important to
Mm.
understand and not fall prey to, a lot of unqualified health, so-called health professionals who are offering these tests with urine and saliva and things. And there is really no way in diagnosing perimenopause yet. There is a couple of tests that they're trying to do in the research field, but otherwise there are no tests to be done for to diagnose perimenopause. So, but if
Mm.
you are somebody who's having mood swings, lowered libido, hot flashes, night sweats, joint pains, all these can be features of perimenopause, but they're also features of when you completely stop your periods, which is menopause. And menopausal symptoms, as many as 34, even up to 60 symptoms have been described, really. But and so sometimes it is important to find a health professional who knows how to join the dots, or at least you should join the dots if possible, because people often may have symptoms like ringing in their ears. They may have a feeling of sensation of ants crawling under their skin. We know that these symptoms actually are part of the menopause, but it's important for an intelligent health professional to also be aware that sometimes there may be other conditions that cause these, and not label everything menopause, but also on the other hand, not label people quickly to be severely depressed when actually what they need is hormone replacement. So it's important to know that mood changes, depression, anxiety, memory loss, all these things can start raising their heads early in perimenopause, including bone loss and lipid changes can start in perimenopause itself. That's why it's so important. As I always say, it's never too early and never too late to start making changes to, enjoy your menopausal years. So it's really important. But menopause itself, classically, there'll be some symptoms that are more common in the first 5, 6 years, and some symptoms that will be more common and more prevalent after the first 6 years of stopping your periods. The first 6 years, that means perimenopause, and then when you stop your periods for first 6 years, tends to be the acute vasomotor symptoms. So that could be, hot flashes, night sweats, mood changes, lowered libido. These are some of the common symptoms, that joint pains and things. Then after 6 years, generally as the estrogen levels start dropping, and there are no foods and things that you can really use to increase your estrogen levels, but estrogen levels, as they drop, vaginal dryness can be a problem, cystitis like symptoms. So you go to the doctor, they may put you on antibiotics, but actually when the culture comes back, there is no infection. That's because the estrogen levels have dropped in the bladder mucosa and in the vaginal mucosa, making sex painful, generally feeling as if you have paper cuts, cystitis like symptoms. So those tend to occur more after 5, 6 years of stopping your periods. It's not a hard and fast rule, but it's a general guide. Similarly, heart health, bone loss, and lipid changes, and peak of putting on weight all tend to sort of be around that thing, and then they stabilize. Sleep can get severely disturbed in the first 5, 6 years, and then this gets stabilized. So it is important to know that you can have some shorter term symptoms like the vasomotor symptoms, and then you have the longer term symptoms, which can be the bone and joint and heart, and genitourinary syndrome, which is the vaginal and bladder changes. So it's useful to know these, but they're not always all women will not fall into the same category. And so it's important to question these and also be aware that sometimes we have to look for other diagnoses, and rather than labeling everything as menopause and perimenopause. And that can be a real danger as well. But if there is any doubt, sometimes doing a little trial of hormone replacement therapy for 6 months to see if the symptoms improve can be a good way of differentiating as well.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yes.
And like you said, just good to be aware that this could
Yes.
potentially be a symptom and it may be
Correct.
something else, but just to have that awareness is
Correct.
so
There are,
important.
bowel symptoms, bladder symptoms. There's not a single organ because estrogen receptors are present in every single tissue of our body. And so
Mm,
when estrogen levels fall, most of the symptoms can be attributed to that. So whether it is, brain health and heart health and joint health and bone health, as the estrogen levels drop, they can reach, you can end up having many of these issues. But the body is wonderful, and especially when you try and follow the six lifestyle pillars, one can be amazed as to how much help you can have, by adopting these pillars to enjoy your menopausal years. It's not all doom and gloom, and I'm certainly here. I'm almost 63, and I stopped my periods now 25 years ago. And unfortunately, at that time, because of the WHI study and the a million women study, the media misinterpreted the results of HRT, and my family doctor did not prescribe me HRT, which I should have had at the age of 38. So, luckily
mm,
for me, I discovered lifestyle changes, and, you know, I found lots of benefits. Would I have benefited from HRT at the same time? Yes. It's not one or the other. So that was
mm.
important. But luckily, all those disinformation has been put to bed. And hopefully, I can also explain that to people who are listening, because some women will need HRT and will thrive on HRT.
Well, we really appreciate you sharing your own personal story and also your just ability to share with us now what you've learned through your own
Yeah.
personal experience, in addition to the research and what has been put to
Yes.
rest, so that you can put the correct information out there so that more women can get help when they need it.
Correct.
I have a question about the six pillars. I would love for you
Yes.
to expand on those six pillars and how they can help mitigate some of these symptoms.
Yes. So whenever I see patients or when I do a talk, I tend to start with seeing where the person is most receptive to. There are six lifestyle pillars of lifestyle medicine, which helps us to prevent and manage many of the chronic lifestyle conditions. And they include sleep, exercise, building a positive social network, avoiding risky substances like drugs and alcohol and smoking. There is also managing stress. And the last one is nutrition. But nutrition sometimes can feel quite threatening, because you're suddenly telling somebody that maybe you want to eat in a slightly different way. And so I tend to find what people are most willing to accept and make the first change, because usually when you make one change in one lifestyle pillar, you'll find it's like a domino effect. When you sleep better, you tend to stress less. When you stress less, you tend to eat better. You also tend to avoid alcohol and things like that. You will also then want to go for a walk with your friend and build your social network. You don't feel low. So it tends to be, and similarly, when you sleep poorly, you tend to stress worse, and you tend to then reach for the donut instead of the apple. So it tends to be. So that's why I try and find what my patient wants to make a first change in. And I would say probably all the lifestyle pillars are equally important, because they all need to be nurtured. But diet and sleep probably would be top of the six pillars, in my opinion. Exercise, of course, is also important, but as I said, all of them are important. Some people may find it's easier to go for a walk at lunchtime or lift a few weights for 10 minutes before they go to work, and they may be more eager to do that before they make a diet change. Or others may be willing to make that diet change, because we do know there are a lot of foods that can actually help improve, chronic health conditions that often tend to occur, especially as you're approaching perimenopause and menopause, but also menopausal symptoms as well. So finding these six lifestyle pillars, and finding out, because loneliness is a big killer. It can be as bad as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, sitting for prolonged periods of time. So trying to get up every 45 minutes, every hour, stretching, doing some calf raises when you're boiling your kettle or making yourself some lunch, whatever you're doing, finding ways to incorporate things rather than making it a chore, I think would be a good way. If you're going for a walk, you might want to catch up with a friend. You can ring them, or you could walk with them. You could have a buddy who you would, go for a painting class, or, you want to go to the gym, whatever. I think finding all these interconnected things can help. And especially most of us will go through a lot of stress at this age. May have elderly parents, you may have children who are going off to university, you may have relationship issues because there may be differences in sexual desires and things like that as your libido is dropping. Or your partner may be having health conditions that may not necessarily, allow you to enjoy a good sex life. All these things can have an effect and can cause a lot of stress. Work stress as well can be important, financial stress. So I always suggest that you can't get rid of the stress. So it's important to identify what are your stress triggers and try to find ways of mitigating them to some extent. So whether it is sitting in your car for 5 minutes once you reach home, doing some breath work before you get in home will allow you to want to get on, the rest of the evening will be a better time rather than you rush in straight from work, really stressed, and then you've got to do all these things. Taking that 5 minutes of just, doing that breath work may be all that you need. Or that you're going to finish your work and maybe run yourself a nice bath or something that will allow you to de-stress, or maybe speaking to a lovely friend. I think it's really important to do that and not think of that as being selfish, because unless you nurture yourself, you find it very hard to be kind to people around you, and you get irritated. And I know this from personal experience, working really long hours, didn't have my time for my children and things like that. So these are things that we can teach ourselves from an early age, and actually educate ourselves that women don't always have to be at the bottom of the pile, and we shouldn't certainly be at the bottom of the pile. So talk to yourself like you would talk to somebody that you dearly love. If you wouldn't say those words to people who you love, don't say them to yourself. Especially, as with perimenopause and menopause, women find that they're putting on weight where they don't want it, and they're struggling with it, and they often find themselves really upset about it. But actually, trying to find, rather than being body positive or body negative, just be body neutral, just be grateful in many ways that, wow, every bit of my body is working. Because when it doesn't, even if you have a little hangnail in your toe, that will make it very aware, or a little ulcer in your mouth. So it just shows how much we rely on everything working together, and finding a little bit of time to be grateful for that and taking time out for oneself is so important. So, I think, I hope I've been able to get across the importance of managing the stress aspects of things. And then, ensuring that you have a good sleep routine is also really important, because it's so easy nowadays, in the days of social media and television and all these things, easy to suddenly keep scrolling, and you're really tired by the time you go to bed. Your melatonin hasn't got woken up, so you've been watching all these bright lights. And so it's really little things like this, which I discuss in detail in my book as well as on my website. So lots of information that is free on my website as well, for people who want to you know delve deep into menopause and perimenopause.
Thank you. Yeah, and we'll definitely link that as a part of this, our interview here today. And you mentioned stress. I think that um, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like, taking that time is so important, even if it's for 5 minutes. You mentioned 5 minutes. Like, it doesn't have to be long. Taking a moment to schedule, like, make sure you do that, because I think life has a way, at least in my experience, it has a way of taking over. Unless you schedule that time in, you'll just
Yes.
keep rolling in that hamster
Yeah.
wheel, and
Yeah.
you won't take that time. So to,
Yeah.
like, intentionally schedule that time, and just 5 minutes can make all the difference. And you've been
Yeah.
talking so much about things being interrelated. When you decompress for just those couple of minutes through breath work or meditation or whatever, just, taking a few deep sighs, like, it doesn't take much.
Yeah.
It helps to bring you to your relationships more wholly and fully, and this increases that connection. And you
Yeah.
mentioned, loneliness. So, like, just that has that cascade effect. So then you sleep better
Yes.
because you're more relaxed. And yeah, I know I agree with you so much, but I find if I don't schedule, like I'm going to take this 5 minutes and I'm going to do it, because otherwise
Yeah.
you get home and you're like, I gotta have to make dinner, and then you have your family who needs
Yes.
something. So yeah,
Yeah,
taking
and
that
some
time is
days
so
it may not
important.
be possible. And if that is really not possible, then schedule something after whatever you're doing to look forward to so that you can then have that time to look forward to. So it's just little things like that. And then coming to nutrition, Nicole, I think it is important. There are some broad brush things like making sure that you front load your calories in the daytime. Try to have a bigger breakfast and a bigger lunch rather than the evening meal being the biggest, because you tend to then go to bed shortly afterwards. So if possible, try to have the bigger meals and most of your calories earlier in the day so you have a better chance of digesting it, metabolizing it. Try to follow the circadian rhythm so you're eating early. Also try to make sure that you're eating foods that satiate you rather than, foods that you find you're hungry again within an hour or two. So ultra processed foods are not really good, especially for menopausal symptoms. We know that those who have a diet which is high in a snack type of foods, oils, butters, and things like that, tend to find that they have worse menopausal symptoms. And studies have shown that, for example, vegans have less bothersome symptoms such as menopausal hot flashes. Also trying to focus on certain foods that contain phytoestrogens or plant estrogens. So you can't actually increase the estrogen levels in your body if I actually measure the estrogen levels, but by eating plant estrogens, which are present in abundance in things like soya. The soybean is very good, very safe. Tofu, tempeh, miso, edamame beans, mature soybeans, soy milk, soy yogurt. You want to try and get about 55 milligrams of isoflavones, and that would come from a handful of tofu every day and a handful of edamame, or a glass of soy milk, and a handful of tempeh, for example. You want to have 2 to 4 portions of soy products, which will give you these very good phytoestrogens that will help not only with menopausal symptoms, but also help with bone health and things like that. But also for the rare person who may be allergic to soy, you shouldn't be worried about soy otherwise at all. In fact, it will help reduce many of the cancers, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, bowel cancer, liver cancer, ovarian cancer, womb cancer. We know in men, prostate cancer risk reduction is by 25%. So there are a lot of benefits from the cancer because of the way the soybean works, preventing the growth of cancer blood vessels, but also it helps you to lose weight, have a slimmer waist, improves the lipid levels, cholesterol levels, heart health. So it's really important that one includes soy and is not scared of it, because I know a lot of people in the plant-based community are scared of soy, and it shouldn't be scared of it. It improves reproductive health. It really, there is nothing, even if you have a thyroid issue, you just want to have a couple of hours gap between your thyroxine and your intake of soy. So that's important. But also, you want to try and really have, as much as possible, a lot of legumes, which means things like chickpeas and lentils and peas. And, it's really important. All kinds of beans are really helpful, and they're rich in phytoestrogens or plant estrogens, fiber like soy, but not as high as soy. Soy is very good because it has the same amount of protein as the egg white, but it also has the right amount of phytoestrogens. But all legumes tend to have phytoestrogens. Lots of berries will have it, pistachios will have it, lignans, which are another type of plant estrogens, are found in flaxseed or linseed, and in cereal and things like that. So it's not as if only soy has plant estrogens and then you'll get man boobs and things like that. No. The beauty about plant estrogens, and especially soy, is that it differentially attaches itself to the beta receptor of estrogen rather than the alpha and the beta receptor, which tends to be what mammalian estrogen, or the estrogen that is trapped in our body fat, that can increase our risk of breast cancer and things. So when you have red meat and things like that, that can be worse for us. While when you have plant estrogens, they will actually block the effect of these mammalian estrogens and will help to promote the growth of breast tissue at puberty, but reduce the risk of breast cancer and improve bone health as you get older. So it's really a very wonderful way of eating foods that really nurture your bone health, your heart health, your lipid health, as well as your menopausal health. We know that from Dr. Neil Barnard's study, women who were on a plant-based diet and added half a cup of mature soybeans every day, which is about 55 milligrams of isoflavones, they found 84% reduction in hot flashes. That is tremendous, severe hot flashes, not even the mild ones. And that was within 12 weeks. So it's really something to be important to take away today, that soy is safe. And even if you have a diagnosis of breast cancer, we found studies have shown that women, for example, who are on tamoxifen, which is often used for maintenance after breast cancer, uh, they found a 38% reduction. I think it was about 38% reduction in dying from recurrence from breast cancer compared for in those women who ate more soya compared to those who stayed away from soya after a diagnosis of breast cancer. So it's really important. And the UK Cancer Group have now agreed that, soya is a good thing that you must include, especially when, because as I said, breast cancer, 1 in 7 to 1 in 8 of us will get a diagnosis of breast cancer. It's very, very common. So it's important to focus on these foods, trying to bring in whole grains, fruits, vegetables, rather than fruit juices, for example, unless you're on holiday, because you want to really eat the fruit with the fiber in it. You want to have vegetables, green leafy vegetables that will help to open up your arteries. You want to have whole grains, so things like millet and brown rice and black rice and things like that. You want to have potatoes and sweet potatoes with the skin because they are very satiating. They're very good, rich in fiber and lots of things like potassium and all that. So potatoes in their own do not make you put on weight or fluctuate your sugars. What you want to do is make sure that you're not making them into chips and crisps rather than you're having them, baked and boiled and things like that. You want to have herbs and spices because we know that a lot of spices and herbs can help with many of the symptoms, joint pains. They can help with regulating your blood sugar levels, for example, cinnamon. You want to try and bring a range of herbs and spices. You want to have a handful of nuts and seeds. People often are scared of nuts and seeds. They say, oh, I'm putting on weight. It's got a lot of calories. Yes, avoid them if salted and roasted, unless, again, it's a treat. But try and have a handful of raw, mixed nuts, one Brazil nut, have almonds, walnuts. All these are very good for your heart as well as for overall cholesterol levels and for weight reduction as well. So it's really important to try and eat a plant forward diet. If you're not somebody who can eat 100% plant based diet, then at least try and look down on your plate and make sure that there's a lot of color on it and a lot of plants on it so that you're really getting the maximum benefit from the menopausal symptom side of things. So whether it's weight gain, because these are all tend to be calorie light, nutrient dense foods. You also want to improve all the other chronic conditions that may be going alongside, as well as your menopausal symptoms and reducing your cancer risk as well. So it's really important. But a lot of menopausal women or women in menopause and perimenopause may not focus on protein. And protein can be a real issue as we get older. And can be a little bit harder, obviously, if you are somebody who's eating a chicken breast versus a completely plant-based diet. But actually, when you include tofu and tempeh, tofu has just as much protein as egg white, as I said, which is the holy grail for people who are, who work out in the gym. But it comes with a lot of other positives instead of the negatives that eggs have. So really trying to, make sure that you're getting at least 1.6 to 1.8 grams of protein as far as possible, unless you are working out much more strenuously, then you might want to even go to 2 grams, but you don't want to be on the lower end. Protein is important, especially as I want everybody who's listening to start doing strength training. Is so important, using your own body weight or using weights or with supervision if needed or on YouTube. It's so important because muscle wasting and bone loss and muscle loss are one of the big killers for us. 1 in 3 women will die of a hip fracture. And once you have a hip fracture, half the women will die within a year. So it's so, so important. And of course, we haven't talked about brain health. All these foods that I'm talking about really help with brain health as well. And menopause, we are worried about our brain. In fact, in the UK, 16% of is the top killer for women.
Mm.
16% of all deaths is from dementia. So it
Yeah.
is important for us not to spend the last 15, 20 years in a home, but instead actually vibrant and enjoying ourselves with our loved ones.
Yeah, gosh, so much to unpack there. You covered so much. Thank you. And I think just a couple of, I mean, lots stood out, but just to highlight a few things that you mentioned. One is variety. And by including a variety, you're helping so many things between from brain health to heart health to bone health because you're getting a variety of nutrients in a plant-based diet.
Correct.
So I appreciate that you said like a handful of mixed nuts and just
Yeah.
highlighted all of the various foods you can add to your plate. So thank you for emphasizing that. Also, thank you for debunking the soy myth. I feel like you explained it really well, the way that soy works and it attaches to the beta receptors. And
Yes.
I just appreciate you explaining that so thoroughly and clearly so that it makes sense. And just explaining also or sharing the amount that could
Yes.
potentially be helpful in a day.
Yeah. And the reason I say 2 to 4 portions, so I tend to have about 4 portions because I tend to do a lot of exercise, um, is not because you can't have 10 portions. The problem is if you have 10 portions, you're going to then cut out on your fruits and vegetables and potatoes and herbs and spices and nuts and seeds and things like that. So you want to have this variety that you were talking about. So that is the reason. Otherwise, there's no danger. You don't want to be having 30 portions of anything, however safe it might be, whether it's carrots or whether it is soy, simply because you want to have space to eat other wonderful things that we have access to. So it's so important. And also learning to shop, in local markets, in ethnic stores, as well as late in the evening when prices have dropped. All these things are really important when you're shopping, if you're on a budget, rather than having to always go for the top produce if you can't afford it, or thinking you've got to eat organic all the time. No, actually, the most important thing, every study has shown that organic doesn't matter as much as making sure that you get a variety of things. On top of that, if you are somebody who can go chemical free and organic, great. But would I advise that for myself? I don't shop like that. Yes, if I can buy apples or maybe, strawberries that are organic, great. But generally speaking, I'm more interested in getting seasonal, local stuff, and a variety of stuff. And that is really important. And in the same breath, while talking about nutrition, I also want to mention that there is no safe limit of alcohol, because a lot of women, as we get older, we tend to eat out more often, or we are stressed, so we tend to have a drink without realizing. First of all, it can be it's calorie dense, it can be, but more than that, the risk of increasing 7 different types of cancers, especially breast cancer, from even the tiniest amount, really having even a couple of units a week increases our risks. And then for every further unit that you add, and remember, 1 unit is no longer what we see in a glass when you go to a pub or into a restaurant. In fact, it'll often be 2 or 3 units in one glass. And so you're already having your weekly quota there. So really keeping it as an occasional treat and really not looking at alcohol as a way to calm down, and finding other ways. And if you are somebody who's drinking regularly, then try and have alcohol free days, substitute it with non alcoholic wines and sparkling water, and slowly bring these things in, because alcohol can affect sleep in menopause, alcohol can affect mood in menopause, alcohol also affects bone health. So there are certain calcium thieves. So you don't want to take calcium supplements, because calcium supplements are not necessarily the best thing for menopausal women. What you want to do is making sure that you get your calcium from a variety of sources. Even oranges have calcium, sesame seeds, green leafy vegetables, soy, calcium fortified soy, tofu. So things like that. But alcohol, salt, sugar, and a lot of coffee can actually be detrimental to bone health. So it is important that you are aware of this. You can have 1 or 2 cups of coffee, but if you have lots of coffee, if you have excess amounts of salt and sugar, and also alcohol, these things can really affect bone mass and bone health. as well as making sure simple things like even eating a couple of prunes every day can actually improve bone health. So simple things that you can actually bring in. A tablespoon of flaxseed will contain lots of omega-3, but will also help to reduce your breast cancer risk, just like soy does. So it's so important to just try and bring little things in and suddenly make that regular enough, and it becomes a habit.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and just to summarize, so it sounds like for bone health, you mentioned, I feel like bone health has been threaded throughout our conversation here, and you brought up some great points. Strength training
Yes,
and consuming a variety of foods, including soy, which can help with bone health,
especially
and then
soy. Yeah.
avoiding, what you were mentioning, like what can
Uh,
be detrimental to bone health is the
yes.
alcohol, excess sodium, excess coffee. So these things in excess, so just being aware of those things.
And adding some prunes to your diet as well.
Adding prunes, and an orange a day, and the
Yes, an
fortified
orange a day for the
soy, and
calcium. Yeah.
yeah.
Chilies,
So
green chilies, and things like that. So, there's so much abundance there. It's just finding what you like. And people are often worried about bloating and things with beans, especially if they're not used to eating beans and lentils. So I always say start with I have a whole chapter in the book as well about bloating and how to manage that. But you wouldn't necessarily go and start bench pressing like 200 pounds, would you? So you would start low and slowly increase the weights that you do. Same way, make sure that you start, if you're not used to eating beans and lentils and pulses, try and start with the smaller ones. So the smaller lentils and the smaller dals and things like that. Cook them really soft. They should be really soft, mashable with a fork. Try and have maybe a teaspoon or a tablespoon, and then slowly over a week or 2 weeks or a month, increase it. And then there are other things that you can add, things like lemon and, asafoetida and things like that will also help in digestion as well. So it's just give time for the gut microbiome, because the gut microbiome, including the estrobolome, which is all these estrogen synthesizing bacteria, they need to eat fiber. And fiber is not found in any animal foods or highly processed foods. So it is important that you're really focusing on bringing in fiber into our diet, because most women get some 18 or 20 grams of fiber in the typical Western diet. So we are a constipated nation.
Yeah, and those beans are so key, and they're also another source of calcium, which I don't think,
Yes.
we don't think of them as a source of calcium, but
Yeah.
they can be a great source of calcium.
It's
You
all these add
mentioned
up. Mm.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you do look at everything you're eating throughout the day, because I've done this personally too, like, am I getting
Yeah.
enough? And you just see everything, if you use one of the online nutrition analysis programs, an accurate one, there are a few that are
Yeah.
good and accurate. You see where all that calcium lies and
Correct.
other nutrients, and it does add up
Totally.
when you get the
And adding
variety.
some peanut butter into your porridge and soy milk, these will give the taste as well as the right sort of fats and allow your supplements to be absorbed, especially vitamin D that you should take, especially ideally in any of these. I live in London, it's always dark, so it's so important to bring these little things in, to optimize health, because it is important to do that. And as I said, protein, please don't ignore protein, because we have this habit thinking protein is not important, and you do have to take out that time to actually calculate your protein requirements and are you getting enough. And strength training along with the right amount of protein is very, very important to maintain that muscle and bone mass.
And just to clarify, you mentioned earlier like 1.6 to 1.8 grams of protein per kilogram per day,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Just wanted to clarify that. Yeah, I do see, I'm like you, sometimes see that it can be forgotten. I think sometimes there's
Yeah.
like an overemphasis of protein, but also when folks start to go all plant-based, sometimes you forget about, because it's easy to
Yes.
grab the starchier foods. So it is
Correct.
really important, especially during these years, to make sure we're still getting it.
Yeah, so when you're having a baked potato for lunch, I would suggest making sure that you have a few cubes of tofu, drizzle with some, soy sauce on top of it, maybe a cup of beans, baked beans with it, and a big dollop of hummus. These things will give you a good amount of protein. And then, you repeat that at breakfast. You want to make sure that, again, you're having your soy milk, your porridge, your peanut butter, you're having protein powder. I'm a big fan of protein powders, vegan protein powders with pea protein and brown rice protein, soy protein. You rotate these protein powders with some creatine, about 4 or 5 grams per day. it's important, especially if you're working out, but you want to add this because it can be difficult if you're somebody who doesn't have a very big appetite. So put it into a smoothie or put it into your porridge, and so that you're getting that protein amount, you know, to make sure
Yeah,
that you're reaching your protein goals as well.
I think that's so important too. I completely
Yeah.
agree. Thank you for sharing that. I would love to move on to some questions from our members.
Okay.
They had a few, some great questions too. Colleen S says, I'm 60 and postmenopause. I would like to know if there's an optimum level of hormones should be. I think you answered this earlier, but maybe you can kind of
No.
restate like that there's not
No,
a
no. We
way.
do not check levels to confirm menopause, and estrogen levels just keep dropping, but they're not going to tell you anything, and there's no way of getting those estrogen levels up other than with HRT. And so, in those situations, yes, sometimes we may measure it to make sure it's the right amount, but generally speaking, it's a clinical diagnosis rather than blood tests and urinary tests and things. So at 60, I would
Mhm.
expect somebody who's, if they've stopped their periods around 51, 52, I would expect those levels to be pretty low.
Do you see any relationship with the lower hormone level, lower estrogen and insulin resistance?
We do know that insulin resistance becomes a problem for many reasons in perimenopause and menopause. And that could be partly due to the lowered estrogen levels, the FSH levels, but also the increased weight and the change in dietary habits as one becomes more sedentary, maybe, and things like that, that you might start if you're retired and things. So there is a relationship, but it is not something that is not surmountable through diet and lifestyle. So
Mm,
that is very, you don't need to be on medication necessarily if it's something that you've just, you know, initially you've just been diagnosed. Certainly spending some time and making sure that you're getting the right sort of foods and right sort of exercise and checking it. And then, yes, some people will benefit, and there are some benefits from being on medications like metformin. Longer
mm,
term benefits may be there for brain health and longevity. We don't know those; they're not hard things. But I wouldn't worry if somebody is diabetic, type 2 diabetic. They should not stay away from medication if diet and lifestyle has not brought their levels down to satisfactory
right.
levels. It is really, really important that we should understand that having high cholesterol levels, high blood sugars, will actually hurt you, and not everybody with diet and lifestyle can bring their levels down. I have a form of familial hyperlipidemia. It took me a lot of fighting with my doctors to get prescribed a statin, which normally people are very happy to prescribe, but because I
Mm,
have always been very fit and well, those algorithms would say that I was not initially at risk, but I wasn't looking at a 10-year risk. I was looking at a longer term risk.
mm,
So it is important. Just because you are having to take medications does not mean that you have failed, that diet and lifestyle doesn't have a role. It has a huge role to help mitigate so many of the chronic conditions, improve heart health and lipid health, but also menopausal health, hugely,
mm.
all hormonal health, actually.
Thank you for sharing that. And Colleen had one other question. She asked if let's see, she said I'm particularly curious about testosterone. She's been hearing postmenopausal women say that they feel fabulous with a little dab of testosterone. What are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
So I have a whole chapter case study there in my book. I have to say, for every 10 women I put on testosterone, only one stays on it.
Mm,
So
interesting.
it's not all that it's been made out to be. We also don't have all the studies out yet. And
Mm,
one has to stay in the right range. So you have to have a level before you start and a level within 3 months. Because if you exceed the amount of doses, then you can have changes like frontal balding and irreversible change in voice and things like that. But for some women, especially around perimenopause, especially if they are doing a lot of strength training, then adding some testosterone can help some women. Some women find that their brain fog improves, others find their memory is a bit sharper. Libido, not so much always, but it is important that one doesn't have the wrong expectations, whether it is HRT, as in estrogen and progesterone, or whether it is testosterone. So, yes, one can definitely try it under the guidance of the right specialist. But unless you change the surroundings around you, unless you're doing the strength training, unless you're looking at your diet, unless you're looking at the alcohol intake, until you're looking at your sleep and your stress levels, I'm afraid any medication is not going to be the complete answer. It can
Hmm.
help, but it can't be the complete answer.
That makes sense. Anne says, could you please describe the relationship between menopause and increased sore muscles and joints?
I think we've talked about the fact that essentially estrogen lubricates and is present in all the tissues. So as the estrogen levels drop, you would expect that joints tend to get more sore, but nothing that should be permanent and nothing that through exercise and diet and lifestyle you can't surmount. But also, women tend to have more autoimmune conditions and they can get worse as one gets older. So, of course, in that situation, one may need medications and things like that. So, it's really important that you don't assume all joint issues are only due to menopause, and you see the right specialists. If ordinary things are not helping, or if you do go on HRT and you still find that you're having joint pains and the dose has been adjusted, you're doing all the dietary and lifestyle things, not drinking alcohol and all that, you might need further investigations with regards to other autoimmune conditions. Rheumatoid arthritis and things are much more common in women.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you. Diana R says, I've been going through menopause for about 5 years and experience horrible night sweats and hot flashes during the day. That is my main concern. I know we've talked about that. I've been vegetarian for almost 30 years and vegan since 2008. I believe I'm doing everything right. Regular exercise, lots of fruits and vegetables, meditation, a positive attitude. What more could I improve? I've tried supplements such as wild yam, Vitex, black cohosh root, among others. I've also tried hormonal medications, but suspended them after hysterectomy and a consultation with an endocrinologist who told me the side effects were preferable to cancer. She's 57 and
No.
desperate.
HRT does not cause cancer. End of. Okay. So, especially for women taking it for the 2 to 5 to 7 years that we recommend. If you are on long term HRT, yes, there is a slight increase, but really, carrying excess weight or drinking alcohol carry much more risk than any HRT does. So first of all, I'm sorry that her doctor or that the doctor who's advised her is wrong. Secondly, if she's had a hysterectomy, she's now on an even safer form of HRT, which is just estrogen only, which has not been shown to have any increased risk of breast cancer. In fact, a lowered risk in the Oxford studies. So first of all is that. Secondly, I would say, why has she been suffering for 5 years when she's already doing all the diet and lifestyle things and things haven't improved? This is a person who definitely should be considering HRT unless there's a contraindication. So that would be my advice. And if she's had a
Mhm.
hysterectomy, she probably just needs estrogen gel, and making sure that she sees the right specialist who understands
Yeah.
the right information. I have a whole section on HRT in the book, and I would advise her to read that so that she can go armed with that information to talk to the right doctors.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Everybody get Finding Me in Menopause. Bring it to your healthcare provider if they're
There's a whole chapter
unsure.
there on, sorry, Nichole, but there's a whole chapter there actually outlining all the questions you should ask your health professional, because it's
Oh,
so
that's
easy
great.
to go there and sit in the chair and forget everything that you're meant to ask because you're scared. And so
Mm,
it's so important to write things down, have the top three answers that you want, and have a list of everything. It's the worst thing for doctors as well when you reach the patient doesn't know when their last period was, or what is their main issues, or what was their medical history, or what surgery they have had, or what medications they're on. So if you have
mm,
all this information, the doctor knows that you are pretty serious about what you're doing. You're not going to go away in 5 minutes. So,
right.
it's your time. And so make sure that you utilize that time very, very well.
Yeah, great tips. Thank you. Margaret says, what foods, and I think you mentioned this as well, what foods can alleviate brain fog symptoms and what foods, if any, can help with vaginal dryness? I think a lot of the foods that you mentioned that have
Yes.
many symptoms, right?
Some foods like soy and watermelon have, some information, small studies to suggest they improve vaginal lubrication. But I wouldn't rely on this. Local vaginal estrogen is safe and you can use it until you're 100. It's not HRT, and it's something that every patient, every woman can use, even women with cancer, with the, involving your doctor. But it's local vaginal estrogen twice a week. It can change people's lives. So that is
Mm.
really important. But foods wise, soy and all vegetables and watermelon is supposed to improve that, vaginal lubrication. What was the other bit she mentioned? What was it?
She mentioned brain fog symptoms as well.
Yeah, brain fog would be again eating foods that really, are anti-inflammatory. So we're talking of a whole food plant-based diet. So when you eat
Mhm.
foods like that, they tend to help with brain fog, because when you eat highly processed foods, they activate something called advanced glycation end products. They tend to damage tissues in your brain, in your heart, in your ovaries. So you really want to be focusing on minimally processed whole foods, really, to improve things. But um, you know if
Yeah,
brain fog is a real issue, then you do have to look and find out what's happening. Are you not sleeping properly? Do you need help and things like that? Are you taking all your
yeah.
supplements? Simple things, and then of course, hormone replacement.
Thank you. Yeah, looking at all those lifestyle factors. One last question from Mao. She says, I've been postmenopausal for 3 years, still suffering from many symptoms, frozen shoulder, mood swings, to name a few. I am using black cohosh, which has helped tremendously for hot flashes. 2 tablespoons of ground flax seeds, and etc. She says, I'm leaning towards HRT, but before jumping into that, my question is, are there any estrogen-rich foods you can recommend? We talked about this. What do you recommend for ligament muscle stresses, such as frozen shoulder?
I think it's important that if you do have frozen shoulder, that you are seeing the right specialist. But foods as such, again, we're talking about anti-inflammatory foods. I'm not happy generally to recommend most supplements, whether it's black cohosh and other medications, unless simply because when something goes into a tablet form or a powder form, uh, it is being altered, and so it's no longer the right thing. So soy isoflavones in the form of a tablet, I'm not a fan of at all. Having soy milk and tofu, great. So I would always ask people to stay on the right sort of supplements: vitamin D, B12 if you're an exclusive plant-based diet or above the age of 50, omega-3, algae-derived omega-3, but really trying to take all these menopause supportive supplements. They are pretty much unproven. They're very expensive. I'd rather you had a big box of berries every day and a lovely handful of nuts and spend your money on a spa or on a nice facial. That's what I would suggest.
I plus one that vote. Yes, nice. Taking care of yourself is so important. Oh my
I'm
gosh,
a great
this is,
fan.
yes, it really is. It just helps everything. It has been such a wonderful conversation with you. You're so inspiring, and I think it's just so important for women to, really be just to steer the ship with their own health. And as you mentioned here in this conversation, just like knowing symptoms, being aware, understanding the questions to ask your healthcare provider, and they can learn more through your book, Finding Me in Menopause. And yeah, just a period in a time's in a time period in a woman's life where we can take actionable steps. And you've provided so
Correct.
many of those that are simple, just like little things, as you mentioned, can make a really big difference. And I just appreciate you sharing all of your medical knowledge and experience, as well as those practical tips for all of us today. So thank you, Dr. Bajekal.
Thank you, Nicole. And remember, I'm not perfect as well. So I struggle with sleep. I struggle with stress. So it's just important to know how to bring all those things together and, look at this phase of life as actually exciting, and find ways to make it as exciting as possible.
Yeah, embrace it. Yes, I'm
Embrace
with
it.
you
Yes.
there. Trying that myself. Thank you so much, Dr. Bajekal. I appreciate your time
Lovely.
today.
Thank you, my dear.
When it comes to cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, and other chronic illness, what really matters isn't how many books you read, how many webinars you attend, or how much you know. What really matters at the end of the day is what you eat and how you live. The science has given us what we need to know. Now it's time for action. It's time to implement and optimize your healthy lifestyle. It's time to get results. It's time to say goodbye to confusion and hello to clarity. It's time to say goodbye to bad habits and hello to good ones. It's time to fall in love with foods that love you back. It's time to join a community that will support you in achieving your goals. It's time for Whole Life Club.